You are 30 years old and invisible. Not poverty, not abuse, just absence. A father who was present and somewhere else simultaneously. A mother who worked hard and meant well and never once asked what you were thinking. You did fine in school. Fine. You graduated college with a degree in business administration and a GP. No one would brag about. You got the job everyone said was good enough. You sat in your apartment on Friday nights and watched other people's lives through a glass screen and told yourself next year would be different. Next year was the same. By 30, you've stopped expecting a door to open. You're just waiting for something to make the waiting feel like it means something. The flyer shows up on a Tuesday. White paper, black ink taped to the door of a coffee shop you stop at because it's on the way. Unlock the man you were meant to be. You stand there longer than you should. You take it. The seminar is on a Wednesday night in a rented space above a Thai restaurant. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, a whiteboard with 3 words in blue marker. Purpose, people, power. 40 strangers with the same expression. Somewhere between embarrassed and desperate. You sit in the back row. The man running it is maybe 45. No suit, just a gray button-down with the sleeves rolled. He doesn't pace or perform. He stands still and speaks at a volume that makes everyone lean in slightly. His name is Daniel. He talks about potential the way a mechanic talks about an engine. Not inspiration, not poetry. Diagnosis. You are not broken, he says. You are unassigned. The first exercise pairs you with a stranger. You each say one sentence. Not a career goal, not a number. What you actually want. You say it out loud for the first time in your adult life. The stranger nods like it's the most ordinary thing he's heard all week. After the session, Daniel finds you near the door. He doesn't hand you anything. He asks one question. He says, "When was the last time someone was genuinely glad you showed up?" You don't answer. He doesn't wait for one. You go back the following week and the week after. By the 6th session, a different man approaches. Quieter than Daniel. Older. A gray suit that fits too well for a Wednesday night above a restaurant. There's a smaller group, he says, for people ready to go deeper. He hands you a card with an address and no other explanation. You don't ask what deeper means. The address is an apartment on the 3rd floor of a building without a buzzer. You knock. A woman lets you in without asking your name. 11 other people sit in a circle on the floor. No chairs, one lamp. The smell of incense and old carpet. The man at the front is not Daniel. He is introduced only as the shepherd. 60, slight, with a stillness that could be wisdom or damage. At the time, you can't tell which. He doesn't raise his voice once in 90 minutes. He says the world most people live in is already ending. Not as a metaphor. The systems are collapsing, financial, spiritual, social, and most people will not survive what's coming, not because they aren't intelligent, but because they are too attached to the wreckage to release it. A small number of people, he says, are built differently. They can sense it. They have been drawn to this room for a reason. You look around at 11 people who all felt invisible until recently. You don't examine that too carefully. He says you have a rare quality. He doesn't name it. He doesn't need to. You sleep better that night than you have in years. Within 3 months, you are running every meeting's logistics, room bookings, the contact list, the weekly schedule. You handle what needs handling before anyone asks. You are useful. Useful becomes indispensable. Indispensable becomes trusted. Nobody gave you a title. You didn't need one. For the first time in your adult life, you had a function. That was enough. That was everything. By the end of the first year, you are traveling. Chicago, Phoenix, Atlanta, Seattle, rented conference rooms in business hotels, the same folding chairs, the same whiteboard. You train facilitators in each city, people who were where you were 8 months ago. Hungry and capable and grateful for the structure. You teach them what Daniel taught you. It works the same way every time, because the hunger is the same everywhere. Each chapter runs on membership fees. Monthly tithe, $120 per member, plus materials, plus a suggested monthly offering for the community fund. Every dollar flows upward. Chapter facilitators see none of the accounts. You ask once where the community fund goes. The shepherd says it sustains the mission. You don't ask again. A facilitator in Phoenix asks the same question more directly at a regional meeting. And he wants a breakdown. He wants documentation. 2 weeks later, he is no longer with the organization. His name stops coming up in meetings. The other facilitators notice. None of them say anything. You don't ask questions, you keep building. By month 18, there are 400 members across 5 chapters. You have a title, regional coordinator, and a phone that rings before you wake up. You fly economy, but you fly. Your mother thinks you work in leadership development. That's not entirely wrong. The hierarchy isn't about belief. Belief is the mechanism. The real structure is the same as any organization where money flows in one direction and loyalty flows in the other. The math is exact. Shortfalls get noticed. Nobody disappears over a shortfall, but they get noticed. By month 22, you have an apartment with a view. A car that starts in winter suits that fit. The weekend retreats happen at a rented lake house 2 hours outside the city. 40 attendees, $1,500 each. Friday evening to Sunday noon. You run them yourself. The schedule, the sessions, the careful architecture of vulnerability and revelation that you've now delivered 11 times. You know exactly where people cry. You know which exercise breaks them open and which one puts them back together, slightly restructured. You've become very good at this. You give speeches. People cry. You feel something during them that you can't quite name. Not belief exactly, something adjacent to it. Enough to keep going. A woman in the inner circle. Her name is Claire. She transferred from the Atlanta chapter to be closer to the center of things. She knows what you are and doesn't examine the parts that don't add up. That's the arrangement. That's always the arrangement. You send money to your mother through a series of transfers she doesn't look at closely. She thinks you work in leadership consulting. The shepherd calls you in one afternoon in October. The room smells like cedar. He says he's been watching you. He says the organization needs a second voice, someone who can carry the mission when he can't be present. He looks at you the way Maury looked at the man who took a blade without speaking, like an investment, like something that finally justified the patience. He says, you belong here. You've been waiting your whole life for someone to say that. The fact that it took this long to find it should have told you something. It didn't. Her name is Margaret, 58 years old, school librarian in Naperville for 22 years. She comes to you after a Sunday session holding an envelope with both hands. Inside is a cashier's check for $47,000. Her retirement account. She says the shepherd explained that earthly assets are a form of attachment. An attachment is what prevents people from surviving what's coming. She says she's ready to be ready. You take the envelope. You pass it upward. Your hands are steady. You're surprised how calm you feel. The doctrine had sharpened over several months. The timeline was now specific. 18 months until the collapse of civil infrastructure. Members were encouraged to divest, relocate, consolidate. The community needed resources to build what came after. 3 families filed missing persons reports for adult members who had stopped returning calls. The organization's legal response was standard. Estranged adults have the right to choose their associations. True, also useful. A 31-year-old man named Kevin is removed from the inner circle in March for what the shepherd calls spiritual obstruction. He had been writing questions down and keeping copies. 3 weeks later, he dies. The cause is listed as suicide. The shepherd addresses it at the following Sunday session. He says Kevin's commitment was never complete. He says the community must grieve without doubting. People nod, you don't sleep that night. By morning, you have an explanation that works. You've noticed that about yourself lately. How quickly the explanations arrive. How ready they are. You start using the word necessary a lot. Necessary is a useful word. It makes a direction feel like a decision. The knock comes at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday in April. 3 federal agents. A warrant. You open the door in a t-shirt. That detail stays with you. 2 years of suits, of rooms where people waited for you to speak. You open the door in a t-shirt and bare feet, and that is what you are again. Just a man in a hallway who forgot to get dressed. The investigation had been running for 14 months. The shepherd knew. He had known for at least 6 of them, which explained the account transfers in February and why he'd stopped attending sessions in person, and why his phone went to voicemail that morning and kept going to voicemail. He was already gone. A flight to a country whose name you learn later from a newspaper. No extradition. He had been building the exit longer than you'd been his second voice. Members began cooperating within 72 hours. 40 sworn statements in the first week. They described the organization with precision. They described you by name. The man who ran the retreats, the man who handled the envelopes, the man who was always present. Your name was on the lake house lease. Your signature was on 4 accounts you believed were administrative. The charges: wire fraud, tax evasion, coercive control of a religious organization. The 400 people scattered as though the organization had never existed. The same people who used your title now told investigators they barely knew who you were. You understood. You had done the same math once on a different person. The organization runs on people who will do anything to belong, including forget you the moment belonging somewhere else requires it. The plea deal takes 4 months, 3 years probation, $180,000 in restitution to identified victims, barred from leading, organizing, or promoting any spiritual, religious, or self-improvement organization for the duration of supervision. That last condition is written in language that is both precise and slightly absurd. It describes your entire adult identity in a subordinate clause. Claire is gone before the sentencing. No conversation, no address. You find out through a mutual contact that she moved back to Atlanta. You don't reach out. The first morning without a schedule is a physical thing. No calls, no cities, no rooms full of people waiting. You sit on the edge of a borrowed couch in a sublet apartment and drink gas station coffee and watch light move across a wall that isn't yours. The silence has a texture. You hadn't noticed how long it had been since you'd sat in silence. Your mother finds out from a news aggregator that picked up the federal filing. She calls. You answer. The conversation lasts 6 minutes. Nothing she says is wrong. Nothing helps. You tell her you're fine. She doesn't argue. You don't speak again for 3 months. Normal employment is closed. Your name in any search engine returns the same 4 articles across 2 pages. Employers notice, or they don't call back, which is the same thing. One afternoon in November, you spend 3 hours in a branch library, using their computer, looking for contract work. Worn carpet, fluorescent lights, a woman at the reference desk who has been there a long time. You are halfway to the door when you realize it's exactly the kind of library where Margaret worked for 22 years. You don't go back. Your phone has 4 contacts now. It used to have 400. You are sitting in a coffee shop on a Tuesday, laptop open looking for contract work, when you see it through the window. A sandwich board on the sidewalk across the street. Black letters on white. Find your purpose. Find your people. An arrow pointing up a flight of stairs. A young man stops in front of it. Mid-20s. Cheap jacket. The walk where the shoulders curve forward and the eyes stay down. The walk of someone practicing invisibility. You know that walk from the inside. You spent years perfecting it. He reads the board, pulls a flyer from the stack on the side, folds it once, puts it in his pocket. The same motion, the same careful fold. You could cross the street. You could tell him what's at the top of those stairs, what the room smells like, what question they'll ask him first. Why it will work on him precisely because of the thing he's most ashamed of. You know all of it. You don't move. Not because you don't care, because you know the hunger won't listen. It never does. That's what makes it useful to someone else. These organizations don't run on delusion. They run on emptiness. Every person who walks through that door is someone who spent years feeling unfinished, and someone finally handed them a shape to pour themselves into. That's the mechanism. That's the whole thing. You spend your life looking for a room where you belong. And when you finally find one, you discover the door only locks from the outside. That's a wrap. The story you just heard is fiction. The hunger it feeds on is not. Somewhere tonight, a 28-year-old who feels like no one is being handed a flyer by someone who already knows his name. If this one made you think, drop a comment, subscribe for more.